Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. It's WinterhelmGames. We are back with some more Twisted Tales. So I'm going to try and do a few more of these, just a few more videos released, so I can do these over the next few weeks or into the summer at least. So this one is 5 more horrifying true cemetery horror stories. So this one is about 23 minutes or so, 23:50. So yeah, from Twisted Tales. So full credit goes to himself. I do let him know when I post videos up. He's happy enough for me to go ahead and to do reactions to his content. So let's get into it.
It was a typical Friday evening, and my friends and I were looking for some excitement to spice up our weekend. We gathered at the local hangout spot, tossing around ideas for a dare that would top all dares. That's when Ben, the resident thrill seeker, suggested spending the night in one of the old cemeteries in our town. Now, this particular cemetery had a reputation.
Has anyone ever done that? Has anyone ever thought, whether it be Halloween or any other point in the year, to do a camp out in a cemetery to see if they can catch a ghost or anything like that, or just as a dare? I can't say I've ever done that or heard of it being done where I am, but let me know.
A dark history of unexplained occurrences, ghostly sightings, and a general aura of unease. But being the brave souls we were, or so we thought, we laughed off the superstitions and accepted the challenge. At around midnight, we found ourselves standing at the wrought iron gates of the cemetery. The moon was the only light, and it cast a creepy glow over the tombstones, and a chill hung in the air.
Nice.
We experienced excitement mixed with nervous anticipation as we entered the cemetery grounds. The first hour passed without anything strange happening at all, but we were still a little creeped out since we were in an actual cemetery. To settle some of the unease, we laughed and joked around a bit, but as it got later, things started to take a disturbing turn. Spooky shadows seemed to dance between the headstones, and the wind carried whispers that creeped us out to no end. Still, we tried to brush it off as our imagination playing tricks on us. Then, Gabriel, always one for a good scare, dared us to split up and explore different sections of the cemetery alone. Now, I'm not usually one to believe in ghosts or things of that nature, but something about the atmosphere that night made my skin crawl. Reluctantly, we all agreed, and each of us went venturing into the darkness on our own. I wandered among the tombstones, my footsteps echoing in the silence. The moonlight filtered through the branches, creating enough light to spread across the graves. It started to feel like I was being watched, and I tried to shake off the feeling, but it clung to me like a ghostly presence. Then I heard a low, soft whisper, barely audible, coming from behind a mausoleum. My heart raced as I approached, half expecting to find one of my friends playing a prank. But as I rounded the corner, I was met with an empty space, and the whisper faded into the night. Unease turned to fear as I realized I was lost in the labyrinth of graves. The familiar landmarks seemed to shift and blur, and panic started to set in. I called out to my friends, but my voice seemed to get swallowed by the darkness. Just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, I stumbled upon a crypt that seemed out of place, a newer addition to the old cemetery. The air around it felt heavy, charged with a strange energy. Even though I know that I shouldn't have, I approached the crypt, drawn by an irresistible curiosity. As I reached out to touch the cold stone, a voice spoke from the shadows, a voice that chilled my bones to the core. "You shouldn't be here," it whispered, low and menacing. I turned to flee, but a figure emerged from the darkness, a figure cloaked in an old, tattered robe. Its face was hidden in the shadows. I stumbled backward, heart pounding in my chest. This wasn't a prank, this was real, too real. The figure advanced, its movements slow and deliberate. Panic surged through me as I realized I was face to face with something beyond my understanding, something from the realm of nightmares. I managed to gather my thoughts and I ran blindly through the cemetery, every shadow and whisper fueling my terror. I finally spotted the gates and burst through them, not stopping until I was safely back at the hangout spot, breathless and shaking. My friends were waiting, concern etched on their faces. I tried to explain what had happened, but the words came out in a jumbled mess. They looked at each other, realizing that something truly terrifying had occurred that night. Days passed, and I couldn't shake the feeling of dread that lingered in the back of my mind. That cemetery had changed something in me, a deep-seated fear of the unknown. I avoided the place at all costs, unable to face the memories of that spooky night. But then came the unexpected twist, a news report detailing a mysterious disappearance at that very cemetery. The authorities were baffled, unable to explain how a person could vanish without a trace in such a small town. My blood ran cold as I realized the truth. The figure I encountered that night wasn't some elaborate prank or hallucination. It was something evil, something that lurked in the shadows of that cemetery, waiting for unsuspecting victims. I never returned to that cemetery, and I warned anyone who would listen to stay far away from its cursed grounds. The memory of that night still haunts me to this day, and I definitely believe in ghosts and the unknown now.
Yeah, I suppose it takes something like that for a non-believer to actually go, right, okay, there's definitely something here that can't be explained through any conventional means or science or common sense. So, there, yeah, you know, I do believe I have seen a few things that do make me question the fact that, you know, there are things that cannot be explained. But if you have any stories of your own, do let me know. Number 2 then.
I was in my mid-20s, living in a small town at the time. There was a graveyard not far from where I lived. On a crisp autumn evening, I was taking a leisurely stroll through the town, enjoying the cool breeze and the colorful foliage. As I passed by the old cemetery, something caught my eye. A little boy, no older than 6 or 7, playing among the tombstones. At first, I thought it was odd to see a child playing alone in a graveyard, but I shrugged it off, thinking he must be visiting a family member's grave. I continued on my walk, but the image of the boy kind of stayed with me, lingering in the back of my mind. A week or 2 had passed and I was walking past the cemetery again. To my surprise, I saw the little boy in the cemetery. He sat on a weathered bench playing with a toy truck, oblivious to the world around him. I approached cautiously, not wanting to startle him. "Hey there," I said with a friendly smile. "What's your name?" The boy looked up, his eyes wide and innocent. "I'm Tommy," he replied, flashing a gap-toothed grin. I struck up a conversation with Tommy, asking him about his family and why he was in the cemetery. He told me he lived nearby with his mom and dad but liked to come to the graveyard to play. Something about his demeanor seemed off, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. As the days passed, I found myself drawn to the cemetery more and more, always hoping to catch a glimpse of Tommy. He became like a little friend, someone I could talk to and play with in the quiet solitude of the graveyard. But as I spent more time with Tommy, strange things started happening. Objects would move on their own, shadows would flicker in the corners of my vision, and an icy chill would settle over me whenever I was near him. I dismissed it at first, thinking that it was just my imagination or the eerie atmosphere of the cemetery. But deep down, I knew something was not right. One evening, as I sat with Tommy on the bench, watching the sun set over the tombstones, he turned to me with a solemn expression. "I have to go now," he said quietly. I was taken aback. "Go? Where?" "Over there," Tommy replied as he pointed to the other side of the cemetery, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've been here too long. It's time for me to go now." I didn't understand what he meant, but before I could ask, Tommy vanished before my eyes. One moment he was there, and the next, he was gone,
Began to think that.
leaving me alone in the gathering darkness. Confused and shaken, I went home, trying to make sense of what had just happened. That night I couldn't sleep, haunted by visions of Tommy's disappearing figure. The next day I decided to do some research. I Googled old newspaper archives for the town, and what I discovered made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. Several years ago, a young boy named Tommy had gone missing in our town. His disappearance had never been solved, and his parents had never found closure. Rumors circulated that Tommy had wandered into the cemetery and never returned. I couldn't believe it. The boy I had been spending time with, playing with, was actually the ghost of Tommy, trapped between worlds, longing to find peace. I returned to the cemetery, hoping to find Tommy one last time. As I wandered among the gravestones, calling out his name, I heard a faint voice, a whisper in the wind. "It's okay. I am okay now," the voice said, a bittersweet farewell that echoed through the cemetery. I knew then that Tommy had found his way home, finally free from the earthly bonds that had kept him tethered to the graveyard. My time with Tommy taught me that sometimes, the most innocent of encounters can lead to the discovery of something beyond our understanding. And as for Tommy, may he rest in peace, his spirit finally at rest in the realm beyond.
Yeah, that was an interesting one, but I kind of just, as you mentioned, the fact that he kept seeing this child, kind of just got me thinking, yeah, he's obviously seen a ghost, and this is just, what is it that's keeping this child tethered or bound to Earth? But there we are. There was always a story behind it, I suppose. But there you are. That was good. We'll go on for number 3.
A few years back, I landed a new job as a groundskeeper at Greenview Cemetery. Now, you might think working in a cemetery during the day is no big deal, but let me tell you, sometimes the daylight can hold more horrors than the night. It all started on my first day on the job. I arrived bright and early, ready to tackle whatever tasks were thrown my way. Greenview Cemetery looked like your typical cemetery, rows of tombstones, lush greenery, and an eerie calmness that hung in the air. My supervisor, Mr. Barrington, a grizzled old man with a penchant for dark humor, showed me around the grounds. He gave me the rundown: mow the lawns, trim the hedges, and make sure everything looks neat and tidy. Simple enough, right? But unbeknownst to me, Greenview Cemetery held secrets that would leave me with more questions than answers. As I went about my duties, I kept getting this feeling like someone else was there and that I was being watched. It was as if the gravestones themselves had eyes following my every move. I chalked it up to first day jitters, but I couldn't shake that creepy feeling. I was trimming the hedges near the older section of the cemetery. I distinctly heard whispers. At first I thought it was Mr. Barrington joking around, but then whispers grew louder. It was as if the voices were coming from the graves themselves. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. I strained to listen, trying to make out the words. It sounded like a chorus of whispers, murmuring words I couldn't quite decipher. Fear crept up my spine, but curiosity got the better of me. I moved closer to one of the graves, a weathered tombstone from the early 1800s. The whispers grew louder, more urgent. I could feel a chill in the air, despite the warm sun shining overhead. Then, I heard a name, repeated over and over again. Helen! Helen! It was ultra creepy and chilled my bones to the core. Who was Helen, and why were the graves calling out to her? I checked the records at the cemetery office, looking for any mention of a Helen buried in that section. There was no Helen listed in that section at all. It was really weird, yet her name echoed through the graves. Days turned into weeks, and I would still periodically hear the whispers. I tried to ignore them and just focus on my work, but they haunted me.
It'd be a person who was buried there probably calling out to another family member who maybe wasn't buried there or moved away at some point. Guess we'll find out.
Following me wherever I went in the cemetery. I even asked Mr. Barrington about it, but he just laughed it off, saying it was the ghosts of Greenview playing tricks. One evening, after a particularly long day, I stayed behind to finish up some tasks. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the cemetery. That's when I saw her, a figure standing among the gravestones, with her back to me. I said, "Hi, can I help you?" thinking it was another groundskeeper or perhaps a visitor who had stayed past closing time, but there was no response. The figure remained unnaturally still, unmoving. I approached cautiously, my heart racing. As I got closer, I realized something. The figure was wearing a long, old-styled dress, and that it was getting more and more transparent, ethereal. It was a ghost. I froze, unsure of what to do. The ghost turned slowly and I saw her face, a young woman with sorrowful eyes, She whispered something barely audible. "Help me." Those 2 words sent a jolt of fear through me. I wanted to run, to flee from this unearthly encounter, but something held me in place. The ghost of Helen, I realized.
Yeah, I mean, I think you get to that point where you can be that frightened you forget to, or you can't scream, or you can't speak. It's the same thing whenever you everything, every alarm bell is telling you to run, but your legs are like, nope. You can't seem to get the message across. I guess that's been the case here.
Had been trying to communicate with me all along. I mustered up the courage to ask her what she needed help with. She told me her story, a tragic tale of love and loss. Helen had been a young woman in the 1800s, engaged to be married to a wealthy suitor, but on the eve of her wedding, she was murdered, her body hidden in an unmarked grave. For centuries, Helen's spirit had been trapped, unable to find peace. The whispers I had heard were her desperate attempts to reach out, to be heard. Shaken by her story, I promised Helen that I would help her find justice, to uncover the truth of what happened to her all those years ago. With her guidance, we unearthed the hidden grave, and inside lay the remains of a young woman, dressed in a tattered wedding gown. The discovery sent shockwaves through the community, and Helen's story finally came to light. Her restless spirit found peace, and the whispers in the graveyard ceased. But the experience changed me forever. I left my job at Greenview Cemetery shortly after, because I was haunted by the memories of Helen's ghostly presence. Sometimes I still hear whispers in the wind, a reminder of the day I crossed paths with the supernatural.
Well, that was good. It was kind of like the last one. You're encountering a ghost, but at least this one was a way that they could let the ghost go to rest. That their story was finally told, and that it was kind of dealt with in a decent enough way that she found her justice. And in the end, hopefully they found. Well, not sure if they wouldn't have found the persons who'd obviously done this, but so long ago. So obviously well gone, but at least for her story to be known, and for it to be at least a record of her. So there we are. Number 4.
You're gonna want to buckle up for this one. It's about one of the most haunted places in Michigan, the infamous Nunica Cemetery. But let me warn you, what you're about to hear isn't your typical ghost story. It's a tale of terror that still haunts my dreams. My buddy Matt and I decided to start a YouTube channel about exploring supposedly haunted locations across the United States. We were all about capturing the supernatural on camera and sharing it with the world. Unfortunately for us, our first stop at Nunica Cemetery would turn into a nightmare we'd never forget. We arrived at Nunica Cemetery on a gloomy afternoon, the sky threatening rain. The cemetery had an eerie vibe from the get-go, old tombstones, overgrown weeds, and a silence that seemed to swallow sound whole. But we were pumped, cameras rolling, ready to uncover the truth behind the paranormal rumors. As we walked among the gravestones, Matt cracked jokes to lighten the mood. I tried to play it cool, but deep down, a sense of unease started to gnaw at me. Nunica Cemetery had a reputation for being haunted by restless spirits, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were about to experience it for ourselves. Our first few hours went smoothly. We wandered, filmed some spooky shots, and joked about seeing ghosts. But as dusk approached, things took a disturbing turn. The air grew colder, and a mist rolled in, obscuring our vision. Then, out of nowhere, we heard a faint whisper, like a breath against our ears. We stopped in our tracks, looking at each other nervously. At first, Matt tried to blame it on the wind, but I knew better. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, as if beckoning us deeper into the cemetery. Both of us trying not to admit we were scared, we went ahead and followed the whispers, cameras rolling, eager to capture evidence of the supernatural. We reached the oldest section of the cemetery, where ancient tombstones stood like silent sentinels. The whispers intensified, swirling around us like a spectral choir. Suddenly, Matt froze, his eyes fixed on a figure standing among the gravestones. It was a man in a dark, tattered suit. He looked almost otherworldly. We stared, transfixed, as he beckoned us closer with a ghostly smile. Without thinking, we approached, drawn in by an unseen force. The man spoke, his voice echoing through the silence. "Welcome to Nunica Cemetery," he said, his words freezing every drop of blood in our bodies. "I've been waiting for you." We were speechless, unsure of what to do next. The man introduced himself as Henry, a spirit bound to the cemetery for centuries. He told us his tragic story, a tale of betrayal and revenge that ended in his untimely death. As Henry spoke, the surroundings changed. The cemetery transformed into a scene from the past, revealing the events that led to his demise. It was like watching a ghostly play unfold before our eyes, each moment more haunting than the last. But just when we thought things couldn't get any worse, we heard it, the sound of footsteps echoing through the cemetery. We turned, expecting to see another ghostly apparition, but what we saw was far more terrifying. A group of hooded figures emerged from the shadows, their faces obscured by darkness. They moved with purpose, surrounding us in a menacing circle. Henry's expression turned to fear as he whispered a warning. "They're the guardians of Nunica Cemetery," he said, his voice trembling. "They protect the secrets buried here, and they won't let you leave."
Okay.
Panic surged through me as the hooded figures closed in. Matt and I tried to run, but it was like we were trapped in a nightmare. The figures moved with supernatural speed, grabbing us with icy hands. I fought with all my strength, but it was no use. We were dragged deeper into the cemetery towards an ancient mausoleum hidden in the shadows. Inside, we found ourselves in a chamber adorned with cryptic symbols and eerie artifacts. The guardians chanted in a language I couldn't understand, their voices echoing off the walls. Henry pleaded with them, begging for our release, but they were unmoved. It seemed our fate was sealed. Just when I thought all hope was lost, Henry yelled a desperate plea. He revealed a hidden sigil on the chamber's wall, a symbol of protection against the guardians. With his guidance, we traced the sigil, channeling its power in a last-ditch effort to escape. To our astonishment, the sigil worked. The guardians recoiled, their power weakened.
Sounds like a video game.
We seized the opportunity, sprinting out of the mausoleum and back into the night, leaving behind all of our equipment. As we fled Nunica Cemetery, the whispers followed us, a haunting reminder of the horrors we had just encountered. Matt and I vowed never to return, our YouTube channel abandoned in the wake of our harrowing experience. I was at a local bar where I was hanging out with friends, having a few drinks and enjoying the night. That's when I saw her, a beautiful young lady with eyes that sparkled like stars and a smile that could light up the room. I mustered up the courage to walk over and talk to her, and to my surprise, she seemed interested in chatting with me too. We hit it off, exchanging stories and laughs until closing time rolled around. As she got ready to leave, I knew I had to ask her out. So I gathered my nerves and followed her outside. To my relief, she didn't seem surprised or put off by my invitation. In fact, she smiled and agreed to meet me the next evening for a date. We exchanged numbers and she walked her way, and I walked mine. I was on cloud 9, thinking I had just met the girl of my dreams. But my dream was about to turn into a nightmare. The next evening, I waited eagerly for our date. I arrived at the agreed-upon spot, a quaint little park not far from the bar where we had met. But as the minutes ticked by, she never showed up. I tried calling and texting, but the phone went straight to voicemail, and she didn't respond to my texts. Disappointed and confused, I decided to walk around the town, hoping to bump into her by chance. That's when I saw her again, walking alone down a quiet street. I called out to her, relieved to have found her at last. But as I got closer, I noticed something strange. She wasn't heading towards any houses or shops. Instead, she was walking towards Rosewood Cemetery. I hesitated for a moment, wondering if I should follow her. But my curiosity got the better of me, and I trailed behind her, keeping a safe distance. She entered the cemetery, and I watched from afar, unsure of what to do. I wanted to call out to her, to ask why she was going there, but something held me back. As I observed, she walked deeper into the cemetery, her figure illuminated by the moonlight. And then, In an instant, she vanished. Just like that, as if she had never been there in the first place. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, thinking I was seeing things.
Yeah.
But when I looked again, she was nowhere to be found. It was like she had disappeared into thin air. I searched the cemetery, calling out her name, but there was no response. I couldn't believe that she just vanished without a trace. The next day, I asked around town about her, describing her in detail to anyone who would listen. But no one seemed to know who I was talking about. It was as if she had never existed. Feeling frustrated and bewildered, I decided to do some digging of my own. I Googled her name, hoping to find...
I would have went back to the bar and asked the barman, do you remember that girl I was talking to the other night? Know who she is, or what's her story, or did she talk to you, or, you know, something like that. It's probably where I would have started, but anyway.
Find any mention of her. That's when I stumbled upon a shocking discovery. The young lady I had met and fallen for had passed away years ago in a tragic car accident. Her name was Chloe, and she had been a beloved member of the community. I couldn't believe it. How could I have met someone who was no longer alive? My mind raced with questions, trying to make sense of the impossible. But as I reflected on our brief encounter, I began to piece things together. Chloe mentioned the Rosewood Cemetery during our conversation. She said that it was her favorite spot to go think and reflect on life at. And on that fateful night, I realized I hadn't met Chloe at the bar. I had met her ghost, a spirit lingering in the world of the living, searching for something or someone. It really creeped me out, thinking about the night we had spent together, the laughs we had shared. It was all an illusion, a haunting memory that would stay with me forever. I never saw Chloe's ghost again, but her presence lingered in my mind, a reminder of the thin veil between life and death.
That was an interesting one as well. I think they've all had their own wee unique way about them, I suppose, but they were quite good. I'll have to see if I can get another one of these done up, maybe for next week or the week after, we'll see. But I'll try and keep them on maybe the Saturdays for now, because I haven't got an awful lot else going at the moment. I do my reactions on a Thursday normally, like sci-fi. And then if I can, I normally try to get, it'll either be Farming Simulator or Minecraft, or a mix of the two. Excuse me, a mix of the two on the Tuesdays perhaps. So that'll be every week, but it'll be every other week. But yeah, I'll try and get another, maybe do this one next. The Mall Horror Stories, maybe do that one next. But yeah, if you do see this, you go ahead across to Mr. Tales, let them know I sent you across, and enjoy your day. Take care, guys, whatever you do. See you next time. Bye.